This podcast is brought to you by Ride IQ. Ride IQ is a first-of-its-kind equestrian coaching platform that will transform your independent schooling rides. Ride IQ members get access to the private mobile app with hundreds of on-demand listen-while-you-ride audio lessons taught by the world's top eventing, hunter-jumper, and dressage coaches. Membership is only $29.99 per month, and every membership automatically includes a free trial when you sign up at ride-iq.com. On today's episode of In Stride, Sinead interviews Robert Costello. Robert, also known as Bobby, has had several top finishes at the CCI 5-star level of eventing, including 8th place individually at the 2000 Sydney Olympic Games, where he rode for Team USA. In 2003, Bobby represented USA again and won a team gold at the Pan Am Games. For the past decade, Bobby's focus has been on ROC Equestrian, his coaching, training, and sales business. Bobby is an ICP Level 4 instructor, and his students consistently earn top placings at major FEI competitions. Bobby is also very involved in the sport through volunteer positions and was honored by the USEA for a lifetime of service with the prestigious Wofford Cup in 2014. Today, Sinead and Bobby are talking about the evolution of equestrian professionals. We hope you enjoy this episode. All right, everyone. I am so excited to have Bobby Costello joining us today, and we have had numerous requests to have you on here. You're very popular, Bobby.
Right.
You are. And like I said in the message, this is really fun for me because we're all so busy all over the place all the time. So this is the best way I have to catch up with my friends, is to make them get on a podcast with me.
It is good because I feel like I haven't seen you in forever.
I know.
So this is good.
I know.
Next best thing.
Yeah. So there's so much that I want to talk about. And one of the fun things I do is I stalk you for like a day or two before we get on this podcast and just,
great.
I know, I love the World Wide Web. But, one of the things that I find so amazing and interesting about kind of your story is obviously like you're from Massachusetts, right?
Mm-hmm.
And
yep.
So, and we've talked to a couple of people that started up there. So that was really the hot spot of eventing for quite some time, right? Like, I mean, it was kind of the Middleburg, Unionville.
Yeah. I mean, the whole, at the time, the USCTA, when that got its start, it was in Hamilton. And a lot of the big sponsors, donors, owners were all in Hamilton. And, really the sport started in that area. A couple of the first big international events, Ledyard Farm Horse Trials, Flying Horse Farm Horse Trials. The first, one of the first, internationally renowned horse designers, Neil Eyre, was also the master of our fox hunt. So it was all about eventing. And then, of course, when Jack LeGoff came to town, when they opened up the 3-day training base in Hamilton, and then we had all the top riders in the country just coming through Hamilton for from the time I was a little kid, and I was probably about 12 or so when the team was at its really starting to have its busiest time in Hamilton, and Tad Coffin and Derek DeGrazia and B. Perkins DeGrazia and just Karen Stives, and you go down the list of Torrance Watkins, Mike Plum, Bruce Davidson, like they all were through Hamilton all the way through David O'Connor. And I think David was one of the last classes, if as it were, to kind of come through Hamilton and get his start there with Jack. And it was great because I had an older brother that competed, and he was friends with a lot of those guys, so I got to kind of go over and watch a lot of the training sessions. So I was exposed to that from a really young age. So it kind of just seemed like, that was cool, and I'm going to try to do that.
Did your parents ride?
No, my parents were completely not horsey at all. I had two older brothers that both rode, and we all learned to ride at the Myopia Hunt Club, and had a great couple of first, lesson ponies, and very, very, I would say not a fancy, a very common way that I got started riding, one lesson once a week. And I think everybody thought that my oldest brother, John, he was really, I think, the talented one in the family. And I think they all thought that he was going to be the one to kind of go on and do things. And he was like, no, I'm like going to college and going to get a real job. So it was up to me. So, yeah, I went to college, and then I didn't get a real job.
Went to college. You still were checking.
It was a great place to grow up, though. We were super fortunate, and my parents were not horsey, but they were incredibly supportive. In that, you want to go do that, that's great. We're probably not going to be paying for most or all of it, or any of it. So figure out a way, and there's always a way. So very, very fortunate.
Yeah, that's so. And I don't know if there was one particular thing, but was it kind of that last class, like you said, with Jack? Like, what made the kind of the switch when things started heading a little bit further south?
Right. Well, it started a little bit, and God, Mike Plum, we should have him on here because he was part of all of that, and Bruce. But, by 1984, I think, that there had been so many people that had come through, and these people in their own right were becoming quite famous and very renowned trainers. And I think, they all came from beautiful places, whether it was in Unionville or Middlebrook or whatever. And I think it began a little bit of, people that weren't as excited to come up to Hamilton to train when they could stay down where they were. And there was a little bit of a rift going into the 1984 Olympics, just like dissatisfaction with the way things, were potentially headed. So I know that, Mike and Bruce may have grown out of that system, but definitely more people were coming through. And I think just the whole thing about having one training base, that was the last time we had that, and we haven't had it since then. And I think it was just the progression of things. Like, we were so incredibly lucky to have. I don't think we would have had the success that we had early on as a country if we did not have that. And whether that could happen now, I doubt it. But it was right for the time, for sure. And Jack Legoff was just amazing, and all those people, I think, really valued being able to learn so much from him. He was just like a master. He was incredible. But it was, I think it was a time, it was the right time for something like that. And I just don't know if it could happen anymore, because everybody's kind of doing their own thing.
All over the place. Yeah. But that's what makes you, like, it's hard to, because obviously you want to learn from the past and past successes and things like that. The times are, different now, but it does seem like, there's always turbulence. I mean, we can just get into it. There's always turbulence in the high performance side of anything, and trying to figure out how to learn from things, but also be progressive. And obviously there's two sides of that coin of trying to figure out, like, the US is so spread out and everybody is so all over the place that there doesn't seem to be kind of a sense of unity or a style or one way of, like learning or riding or being, which is great in certain places, but then there's also not a cohesive feel as well, And so it's, how do we take from that and incorporate it into what we're doing and where we're going today?
Yeah, I think you're right. And I always say, like, if I become one of those people that always bangs on about the past and the way that we did it, just like shoot me, because it makes me crazy when I hear that from other people. So, the only thing I will say, like, everything changes. And I think we had for many years, I was fortunate to be influenced really positively by Mark Phillips, back in the kind of late 90s into the upper 2000s. And I thought that was a nice balance. We would have training sessions at, someone's facility, someone's base, and, everybody was kind of there. Not that everybody was watching every single lesson, but we would all show up at the same place for a training session for 2 or 3 days. And then we'd go off and do our thing and then come back together like 3 or 4 weeks later. I thought that was a really nice trade-off. I learned a ton from watching. Like, I never had like a super long string of horses. So a lot of what I learned was from watching. And it wasn't until much later that I maybe had 2 or 3 or 4 advanced horses at one time. And, that hardly happens for anyone. So from the time I was actually a little kid, just watching Sting at the ring and watching and learning to count strides by just watching other people jump is, it was amazing. So, Yeah, things change and it's totally cool. And, you know, it's just striking the right balance, I guess.
Yeah, yeah, and everything. So when you were, so obviously, everyone's heard your resume on here, but you've gone to Pan Am's, Olympic Games, Burley, Kentucky, all of that. What did your barn look like? Like when you were kind of really hitting your stride there for a while, like you just hit on, the string of horses or whatnot. How did that look?
Right. I was super fortunate. So after college, I started, the first winter I came to Southern Pines for like 2 weeks, North Carolina. And then the next year I was able to come for like 4 weeks, which I couldn't believe. Like it was just awesome. And then I had a wonderful business partner after I got out of college. Leela Clay, she owned horses for me for years. And we also had our little CNC Sport Horse Incorporated. We bought and sold horses mostly that we got from England. And so we kept a kind of a small sales business, which allowed us to keep 1 or 2 horses kind of, that looked like they were going to be good enough. So I was very fortunate in that early on, I didn't have to teach a ton to keep the ball going. I mean, I definitely had a lot of support from Leela, and the farm paid enough to paid off itself, especially in the winter when people would come to train in the wintertime and, have stalls at our place. And so I was very fortunate because it was never a behemoth operation. We had 2 barns on our property. The first barn, my barn, had like 12 stalls. So I never really probably had more than 8 or so. So we would always like rent out a few other stalls in my barn, and then we had a whole separate barn for winter people that were coming down to train. So so I was very fortunate because it always was very manageable. I only needed ever like 1 or 1 full-time, maybe 1 half-time person. We could always, the farm was awesome. It was very manageable size-wise. So I was very fortunate in the way that I was able to train horses and run my business for years. Really fortunate.
It's interesting because I was having this conversation this morning with another rider, and it feels like, everything comes full circle. And now with everything that's happening, where staffing is so difficult, and, the number of horses, it used to be like, 5 or 6 or 10 years ago, it was like, how many horses can I get into the barn? Can I have 20? Can I have 30? Can I have 40? And I'm going to have 15 working students. Nobody's getting paid, and especially me. And, and we're all just, the only way we're going to be successful is if we're like blind dog tired and have 4 broken bones,
Yeah.
And
it's crazy.
Yeah, it is crazy. And now, things seem to be leveling out a little bit. There's a few people that have had a lot of success that have very publicly said, my string is small, I keep it manageable, a little bit kind of what you're saying right now. And that's not eight to 12 horses is not a small string, but 1.5 staff, a manageable situation where you can really focus on the quality instead of the quantity.
Absolutely.
It was like,
I've always said there must be like a formula, because more is just more, right? Like, you have 40 horses, that's hay that you're buying for 40 freaking horses. And I've always said like there has to be like a number where this amount of horses is going to take care of always making sure that you have horses coming along, you have a few horses that are paying their own way or paying their way, and there must be a number where you can make money and be successful, not run yourself ragged, be able to really focus on becoming the best event rider, because most everybody that has these huge businesses, that's what they're trying to do. But oftentimes it goes completely against what they're trying to do, just because they're just they're out there and then teaching until 8 o'clock at night, and so there's got to be a formula. I don't know who's figured that out yet, but
not the people with the 40
to
horses.
other people now.
Because there's no time to do that. I mean, that's the thing is creating that space so you can sit down and figure that formula out. And I guess it feels like such a hand-to-mouth operation sometimes that it's scary to go, okay, I'm going to try this. Like Tick and I do that every summer. We're like, okay, we're going to cut down on the winter numbers, and then people call and you just say yes, sure, we'll work it out, fine, and it's a hard balance, but I think trying to figure out that balance is coming back around, and especially even if it's a forced hand, because because it's so difficult to find help, and and I think that shift is almost good, because I think the help that you have in the barn should be paid, and it should be paid for the job that they're doing. But you can't afford that to have 4 or 5 people on the salary that they actually should be making. So
no doubt.
no. So that's the balance of that. Sorry, got sidetracked there. So you kind of have this really successful thing going on, and then was there a moment, did you just decide, because you retired quite early from the sport?
Yeah. So it's interesting, because the story behind that is, well, kind of 2 stories. The farm where I trained out of, and my business partner for years and years and years, her husband was not well, she was not well. So it didn't look like it was ever going to happen like that, but the farm ended up having to get sold. So I was kind of like, okay, you now got to figure out how you're going to do this on your own. And I was 40, 42, something like that. I was like, I always say, eventing and competing is great because you can do it forever. But the flip side is you can do it forever and not really think about, okay, how am I going to make a living? How am I going to make a business? I always said, I do not want to be a broken down horseman at 65 years old and, be like, okay, I have no money and I have nothing except for, memories and, achy old bones. So I kind of thought, I honestly thought that I would compete till I was 42 or 45. I was not one of those people that thought that I needed to still be out there, and, at 60 still doing it. Although, man, that's 60 is the new 40. People are out, it's amazing. So more power to all those people. At the same time, Mark Phillips was finishing up, with his coaching for the team. Philip Dutton and I decided to go in and apply for the job as a duo. At the time. So it was, and funnily enough, Philip was going to retire at the same time as well, because he had physical problems, and he was thinking the same thing about having to try to make a real living at this. So it didn't work out, and he went back to competing, thank goodness, because he's had so much success for us for so many years. And I just started to really concentrate on my business of the training, and I was still riding and competing a little bit, but I was always this person that I loved the competition. The bigger the competition, the more pressure. I think the better I was. The day in, day out grind of the whole thing. With everyone, I think it just wasn't something that I knew that I wanted to do forever. Right. I really enjoyed the teaching. I really enjoyed the training and coaching part, especially. So I just decided that I went off on my own, started ROC Equestrian, which is my own business, and haven't looked back since.
And do you miss it? Was it a hard year or 2 or a bit of time?
There was a year, I felt like for a couple years that I had one foot in, one foot out. Yeah. That was the worst. I was either you're going to do it or you're not going to, you don't, you it's too serious and too difficult to feel like you're transitioning kind of in and out. So those were a couple of unhappy years for me, because I just didn't feel like I was succeeding at either. And then I remember that it was this, maybe the second year that I hadn't competed at Kentucky. And usually I would you would make that long walk back to the stable, after the show jumping is done. And I would be a little bit grouchy and blue. And finally, 2 or 3 years after I hadn't competed there, I was like, you know what, it's okay. It's time to move on. And honestly, since then, I haven't missed the competing part, the day in and day out competing part, at all.
Right.
I do, you totally, and this, you've jumped around all the big tracks in the world. And when you go to a big competition, you're like, oh my God, if I could just show up on the day, that would be great. But that's not how the world works. So
what?
But no, I feel really lucky, and I'm totally happy with the decision for me, and I never was one that was going to try to have a big business of, 6 employees and, 4 working students. I'm basically a business of 1, and can make it work out. And I love it. I'm really lucky.
Yeah. It's so interesting. And do you think that that having success like early on helped with that? Like, do you think if you hadn't have been so, this might be a loaded question. You know what I'm saying?
You
Like
think it
sometimes
was
it makes
early on.
you just got a childlike face.
Yeah, it was so not early on. I was such a late bloomer, man. Like
Really?
yeah. I just like schlepped around through all of my 20s. I thought that I was pretty good, but like I'd never really had any good horses. I was always out there competing. Good thing is I was riding a lot, competing a lot, jumping a lot, getting a lot on a lot of horses, but it really wasn't until I think I was maybe 32 before I got invited to my first training session with Mark Phillips. And it wasn't until I was like 33, 34 before I, had the one horse that we always hope for, and that was Chevalier, who I took to the Olympics. And I was 35 when I went to the Olympics, and 37 when I went to the Pan Ams, and probably 36 when I did Burley at first. So I definitely was a little bit of a late bloomer.
Right.
But again, the great thing about this sport is, like I tell people, don't get distracted. Don't get bummed out if you're not 22. It's probably better off if you're not 22 and being successful. Because I wasn't really worried about it, but when I look back at it, it's like, holy crap! Like I was in my mid 30s before I feel like I really hit my stride.
Yeah.
And I did that, and I had probably, honestly, probably 10 years at the top level, feeling like I was really in it and enjoying that kind of life. It was awesome, but I just I never really thought I'd do it forever.
Yeah, it's interesting. I a couple years ago, I was talking to Rebecca Howard in England, and she had just come off of, I think, Rio maybe, and it was probably a year later, 2 years later, and she was like the highest placing female rider at Rio. I think she finished 10th individually, and things were coming back around. She'd had some young horses. Her top horse had retired, and then somebody had asked her about, there was a possibility of really pushing towards 2020 or something like that, and she said, I looked at it, and I'm wise enough to know what it takes to get there. And she said, I actually hesitated, whereas if I had been in my 20s, I would have been like, hell yeah, I'll do whatever. Like the horse is jumping cross rails. Like, I'm fine. We'll go, but kind of knowing, like kind of what you said, the day in, the day out, what was going to be required to get there and be successful. She just said, I think actually this one, we're not going to be ready. Like I'm not going to put that into it. And I think
so interesting because after the first Olympics, I was all about like, I'm going to the next Olympics. Absolutely. Without a doubt. I'm going to even be more hungry and more organized and have more horses. And I feel like I really set myself up way better for 4 years later. And, I had a couple of horses, and I did all the right things, and the horses stayed sound and blah, blah, blah. And it just didn't work out, like just because, as it does, because it's really hard. And like I fell off at Kentucky, and I was like, okay, well, I guess that means I'm not going to the Olympics. But and everything leading up to that was like, this is great. Like I'm right on track, and I feel way more like I feel like I kind of slipped in 4 years before, and I was like on it, and I was organized, and everything was going right, and it's just like at the drop of a hat, it can all end, which is what is so kind of cool about our sport and any sport, like any sport, like watching the Olympics. You see like how things can just come crashing down with like in an instant. And I mean, I don't think I was that dramatic about it, but you
probably
can't always plan.
I mean, probably on the ground. I don't know if there was live stream there, but there might have been a broken whip or something.
Exactly. On my head.
Is that a hard line? Because obviously, skipping ahead a little bit, like you're a chair of the selectors, like you've been on every single committee, like as far as like really playing a big part in the behind the scenes of high performance. But I'm sure more than not, you see people almost losing themselves in that one goal, in that one thing, in that. And I mean, how hard is it not to shake someone and say, like, take a second, get some perspective. It's not helpful.
I guess I'm not often tempted to do that, because I think everybody has their own way of trying to get somewhere. And frankly, if you're not kind of a little obsessed and a little bit nuts, like you're probably not going to make it anyway. So I don't know, like I've always kind of just hung back and been interested, because everybody gets to where they hopefully want to end up in a different way. So, I was okay with it taking a couple of more years. Weirdly, but I was also a really impatient person, so I'm full of just contradictions. But I think everybody has their own way that they're going to hopefully make it to the top. And some of the best event riders this country has put forward haven't always had the easiest trip or the easiest route, or had maybe even the easiest personalities to get there or whatever. And it's just it's so interesting that the mind of the event rider.
Well, totally. That's a book. But it's like, I mean, that's a really like healthy mindset to have, because it's so easy to always see things from your perspective. You're like, well, I wouldn't do it that way, or that's crazy, or this person. But then the more you kind of look at people, or even like, horses and all of that, like everybody is going to get there. Something that works for me might not work for somebody else, and trying to figure out the balance of that. That's cool that you said it's like interesting to sit back and watch, and see how that's going to work out for someone.
Get out the popcorn and
you're like, how is this? I have an idea, but it was like I was writing some stuff down for this. And have you watched on Netflix Inventing Anna?
I have not.
So I just started. I mean, it seems to be quite popular. So I just started watching it the other day, and or around 2:00 in the morning, actually. And but there's this one part, and it just came to my head when I was kind of thinking about our talk, because she basically kind of says, like, my superpower with people is that I don't have to like you to recognize that there's like something great about a person. Like there's something that's going to be successful. I don't have to be friends with everybody to recognize it, And I thought that was so interesting, because I'm like, that has to be what it's like when you're like in a selecting type of position, or, like it has to be hard sometimes when you're like, okay, not that you would ever dislike or not get along with everyone, but if there happened to be that person, like to separate that and go, that's irrelevant right now. Like,
absolutely. Yeah. As long as it's not, upsetting the team dynamic, and honestly, a little bit of that, Jack Legoff they said that he would sometimes purposely put two people, roommates or in the same lesson or whatever, because he knew that they were going to kind of rub on each other a little bit and kind of get under each other's skin. And I've heard great stories from, Karen Stives about, I won't say who, but like who, the rivalries that she had, and and how she really finally understood what Jack was trying to do. He was trying to create a little mini competition, a little mini pressure, like all the time. And it was pretty interesting. To hear like her perspective of that, with a little retrospect. But
well, I think like talking about that word, pressure, and I talked to Kim Severson. We did a podcast with Kim a little while ago, which was really fun and really interesting, because she's such a strong personality, and like very confident, like she's like, well, you have to have self-belief. You just have to have it, And I'm like, I know, but what if you don't? She's like, well, I've never thought about that. And but creating these, and we chat about that for a little bit, but like pressure and talking about pressure, and that figuring out a way in we're always doing it with the horses, right? Like trying to get them to understand and appreciate and navigate pressures that they feel. And the same thing for people in these team situations is like how to create that space. And that's always seems to be this debate back and forth, which is hard in this time and age, because obviously things are getting a lot more in a good way, like a lot more organic and a lot more geared towards, your mental state and how you're feeling and that type of thing, which is really important, but also being able to withstand pressure and be put in situations and feel, confident. Like how would you advise people to navigate those tracks, basically?
Gosh, I don't, that's a really, really hard one. I don't know if I know that answer, honestly. Like I'm totally serious. Like, think, you gotta, surround yourself with a great team, like surround yourself with people that believe in you. Surround yourself, although, with that person that will also tell you the hard truths, right? Like, and I just think it's how, I don't know, like, it's just how you kind of go about setting up what you want to do. I think that's a super hard question, and I'm not going to be successful answering it. What are your thoughts? No, I'm really interested. What are your thoughts about it?
Well, I think you're right. I mean, I guess I'm not totally sure myself. I think about it a lot because I think your community, like you said, is really important. Having people that you trust tell you the hard truth, that you believe, there's a lot of people that'll tell you what their truth is.
That's a really good point, actually.
Yeah.
Yeah, we've all had that.
Yeah. Like, I don't need to listen to that.
Exactly.
But I don't know. I mean, I guess I was thinking a little bit, it just struck me, that conversation about Jack Legoff and a little bit of creating those like mini pressure situations and those little mini competitions within a safe-ish environment to challenge that. Can you ride when you're a little like flustered and a little up and a little, can you excel in those situations?
Yeah. He would be, I did get to go, my dad used to like just drop me off at the team, the USET on Bridge Street in Hamilton, Massachusetts. And I would just sit in a little viewing area in the indoor, and he would like pick on that one person a day. And that would be like, and it would be just never ending, just like at that person, just to see how tough they are. And could they ride through it, and could they ride through the pressure, and had nothing to do with the horse. Could that rider ride through all that pressure? And usually they did. And then he would just be like, yeah, look at you, you're great, whatever.
Yeah.
But he, his style was not easy, man. Like, and I don't know if anyone could be as tough as Jack could be and still get away with it, or, but man, it sure was successful, say what you will, it was successful.
Well, I think it's funny. Like I started riding with Scotty Keach about a year ago, and he's pretty tough. And I didn't realize like how kind my instructors had been. And I remember going to take a lesson with you. I think it was right before Kentucky or something. And we jumped and we finished, and you were like, that was so great. I just wanted you to feel really good here. And because I had kind of a tough year, and I was like, okay, that's what I needed. Like, that's totally what I needed, was this good, confident ride. And if that last ride had been with like Scott or probably Jack Legoff, I would have just quit. That would have been that. But, there's a time and a place. And now, like a year later, in the situation that I'm in, like it definitely, I can handle a lot more now, but it was, I kind of knew what I was getting into, if you know what I'm saying. Like, you kind of have to be ready. And it's funny because there's certain people that I think this, that type of program would be so good for. And then I think about it a little bit more, and I'm like, I think it wouldn't work. Like it would be too much. But then you look at the parallel of the situations that you've got to go to and got to deal with, and being in a team situation. And it's a lot of pressure. So it's like trying to figure out how to do that in a way where criticism isn't personal, like where it's like it just is what it is, like obviously like the ego part of it has to be a little separate, which, one of the things that I didn't really put together until the past year or two and doing some reading was like, I didn't think I had much of an ego, but I actually had like a huge ego, not in the sense of I was like, I'm the best thing ever, but in the sense that like I cared so much about what other people thought about stuff.
Yeah. I think that's a really good way of putting it. Actually, I think we're all a little bit like that.
Yeah.
To some extent.
Which makes it really hard in a competition, like in a pressure situation, when you're not totally focused on what you're doing because you're worried about what you're doing.
Yeah, exactly.
Or how you're being
Yep.
perceived. Whereas in probably some of those training sessions that you're talking about, like at that point, everybody was kind of like ground down to whatever. So you weren't really thinking that way, I guess, about getting a mental pep talk. I don't know.
Yeah, I loved like the more, again, like the person I got to ride the most with was Mark Phillips for probably 10 years in training sessions. And I just loved it when he would get like really into me for something. And it was always me. Like it was always totally always me. And like the harder that he kept pushing, the more I would kind of get into it in a really positive way. And I don't know, those situations, I guess I'm masochistic, but I love it when, someone's really hard on you to get you to that place to improve. And, and I think it's all about the timing of when to do it. And I think he was actually very good about that. And you knew, and I try to do the same thing. Like there are certain times, especially if you're a couple weeks out from a competition, that's the time that you can, say like, come on, like you just can't make that mistake. Like you're way better, or just, and then get back, closer to the competition, with most people, you have to know when to let off a little bit, and and at the competitions, when you can press a little bit, but when you have to let off. I think it's a huge, like if you're gonna coach people at a high level, you have to have that innate sense of when you can push and when you can't. And we never actually all get it perfect, but I think it's something you learn a little bit more as you get old. Not older, old.
Just old like us. Well, and that's huge, because you've had a lot of 5-star students that have been with you for decades, really.
Yeah, really.
We're all old, man. But like that would you say is something that is probably incredibly helpful when you know someone that well, that you can figure out when to push.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. And those are the easy people, because like you know exactly when you can push a little harder, and exactly when they need you to let up, and or the personalities that actually do better with being a little bit tougher, and there's certain people you just can't go there, because you're just going to break them down, and and they're gonna just go off and to the sunset. But,
and that'd be that. So like pulling forward, and you don't have to get too specific, but to where we're at now, obviously we're in a little bit of a odd position heading into a world championships. And
are we? I didn't know what's going on. I didn't know anything was happening.
There actually is nothing happening.
There's nothing.
There's no one at the wheel.
You would be right.
I'm
pretty brilliant.
So we've got to get somebody at the wheel for the next year, and then big picture, think about somebody there. And like from your perspective, would you, everybody has obviously a different opinion, and I don't think there's a right or a wrong. Like the type of person that needs to coach or lead or be a chef, is it a person's person? Is it a horse person? Is it a psychiatrist? What is it?
That whole psychiatrist thing, like that's something I think that has always gone way underutilized within our team for years. We always seem to have someone come in for like a year, and then because that's really important, then they kind of forget about it, and then maybe we should get like a team. So that to me is something that should come back, and people should not be forced to use, but encouraged. It was certainly amazing for me. Anyway, back to your original question that I'm trying to avoid. I don't know. I honestly don't think that we've gotten it wrong the last couple of people that we've had. I think we've been really lucky to have a couple of these guys. I don't know. I don't know what the answer is. I think a little bit is, I think to a point, like the riders have to get realistic about what their expectations from whoever that person is, even looking forward into the future. What they really need, to help them be at their best. Is it riding lessons? Is it help, with horse management? Because you're always going to have people we often talk about high performance, like, you know, that it's all just the Phillips and Boyds and, you know, people that have been doing it forever, but there are always going to be one or two or three people coming into the program that really are going to need a lot of guidance. You right? They're
Yeah.
going to from you know they're 24. They all of a sudden have this horse. They find themselves on the in either the pre-elite or the elite list, or they're going to blend for the first time. Yet they may not have like a real program set up for their horses, you know, well-being and, you know, the mental side of it. So there's so much that one person has to do. Like, yeah, there are people that just need to kind of be, you know, kind of ushered along and just be supported. And then I think there's always going to be people that you have to have someone that can, you know, teach them riding lessons if they need that, or get them in touch with the proper, you know, veterinary care, or maybe not proper, but more advanced veterinary care or farrier. So it's a tough one. Like, I don't think we've gotten it completely wrong. So I don't think we should go crazy. But I don't know. I think that's what this task force that's been put together, you know, we can just leave it to them. Figure it out. But you know, there are great people on that task force, and I know there's the performance advisory team, phenomenal people also on that. So I think there's going to be a lot of good information coming from these groups. However, we've kind of been down this road before, so I don't think we can get, you know, I don't think we should put too much pressure on them, but I don't think we've gotten it completely wrong, and I think there were a lot of good things that were happening. And so, sorry, I'm grammatically checking myself.
Yeah, I'm in Florida. I have no idea what's right.
So yeah, I don't know. What do you think? Like, I'm not trying to ditch to avoid the question, but it's,
no. Well, I think if there was an easy answer, we would have figured it out.
Yeah, for sure.
You know, I mean, I think there's a lot of smart people, like you said, on all these things. So I think there's not one right answer, or else it would be sorted. And I totally agree. I think there's been a couple of kind of heads of state that have worn the kind of I don't know, scarlet letter or whatever, and it's not necessarily, you know, it's way broader and way bigger, and you know, there needs to be more support and there. So I think unfortunately some of the timing was just off, but I think you're right. I mean, I guess my thought is a little bit kind of where you're at. I think it does kind of circle back to the riders and the responsibility, and kind of figuring out what you need and what you want, and in any given situation, you know, figuring out what that person can help you with or not. And if they can't, then okay, then they can't, and then you gotta kind of.
And at the end of the day, it's that they need to be accountable, and I think that's it's maybe just human nature not to want to be held accountable or hold yourself accountable. I think the first, you know, when things go wrong, if you are not first looking at yourself and at your program and figuring out why something is not working, then, you know, you're just fooling yourself. Like, you can't, like, I don't care if they're 10 of the 10 Jack Legoffs that come in, like, you're never gonna make it. Like, unless you are really honest with yourself and you have people around you that are gonna keep you honest, you know, that it's never going to work. So, you know, it really does, the whole, you know, it's such a trite saying, rider responsibility or whatever, like you hear it all the time, but it really is like you have to be like, you know, I would always, you know, to a fault, sometimes people would tell me to a fault that, you know, I would always be like so hard on myself and blaming myself, and, you know, like, you know, well, you know, sometimes it could be just the horse had a bad day or whatever. It's like, yeah, but like, I think, not that I was some like freaking sane or something, but you know, you have to look at yourself and you know, within yourself, and don't, you know, and we're pros, all of us are pros at kidding ourselves, and you just can't do that. And like, you figure it out. Like, I remember, like, I didn't make the 2002 WEG, and I had just gone to the Olympics 2 years before, and you know, like, I was incredulous. I couldn't believe that I wasn't named to the team. I just couldn't believe it. And now looking back on it, I was like, well, of course you weren't picked. Like, your horse was lame, you know, like,
Yeah.
barely trot him on the last day of the Olympics. It's always like a little touch and go getting through, like we always were able to, but getting through, like, of course they weren't going to risk that again and putting, and at the time, I just was like, I just couldn't believe it. And I think when you're that close to it, that's what you are. And you have to have, like, when I was a selector, if people would, call me after the list, training lists would come out and they would be upset that they weren't on the list. And people would say, like, oh, doesn't that bother you? Isn't that really hard to take? I was like, no, like, if they weren't mad, if they weren't irritated or frustrated or whatever, then they don't want enough. I'm fine with them calling me and asking me the hard questions and whatever. And, like, if they just were like, oh, well, that's okay, then those aren't really the people that you want anyway. Right. So, but with time comes, like, perspective, and that's really hard.
No, you got to spin it the right way. But I think that, like what you said, almost like what we were talking about earlier, is almost maybe one of those things that comes out of it is really getting that community around you that can give you those honest truths, or keep you, because like you said, like sometimes you get so close to it, so that when you get into a situation, it's either going to enhance what you're doing, or it's not going to affect it. Like I think that's some of the things sometimes, is people move from this one phase over here, and then they go into the team situation and they abandon all of that and think that this is some new different thing. Whereas, like, if you could move into
that, we see that happen all the time. That happens all the time. Yeah.
Whereas if you can build your community, and and I think that's like a lot of people that I've been speaking to, it seems like everybody's, because there's kind of this gray area happening right now, everybody kind of has to, like, sort themselves out and get themselves together. And then it's like that might, without even meaning to fix it, that might fix it. The space, so that people, when they come into that situation, already have kind of this group, and then the team either helps it, or it does, or it just stays as good as it was when it came in, as opposed to, sometimes if you abandon everything, then it just goes completely the other way. I don't know. I was going to ask you something else, but I got distracted in the middle of solving all of those things.
We really solved it, didn't we?
I mean, it's totally sorted out. We just decided it's solving itself. Nobody has to do anything.
Exactly. Right. Exactly.
I love it. Well, and I think one of the things that you do that's so, like, really cool is is kind of that leading by example. Like you're able to kind of come in, and I've seen it in your coaching and in your riding and with your students and whatnot, is you actually do walk that line incredibly well, of being able to have your point and help somebody be successful without feeling like it's an attacking or overbearing type of thing, which does not come easily for a lot of people. Maybe it doesn't come easily.
And it doesn't come from, and it doesn't come from day one, I was like, if I worked for me, or if I was like when I was like 24, I'd be like, ugh, who is this? He is just so obnoxiously full of himself and moody.
I just can't even picture that.
Oh yeah, totally. I was like, I think I was basically a pleasant, nice person, but I was like, you're so self-absorbed at that age. Like, and you think every one of your problems is like the only person that has that problem. And the whole world revolves around me. Like, totally. Like I would have been not as easy to get along with then as I think maybe I am now. But you learn a lot of that stuff as you go, and you have people that tell you, like, you're being insufferable, stop it. So and that was usually my mother, actually.
See, that's one of those people. You got to have one of those in your circle that you can hear that from and go, okay, you're right. You're right. I get it. Awesome. Okay, well, I've had you on the phone for an hour, so I'm gonna.
I know. Yeah, right.
So I'm gonna get into these questions that I sent you.
Okay, I wrote down notes. I'm not gonna read from them verbatim, but I don't want to sound stupid. But I'm not. But if I glance down, I'm not looking at my belly button. I'm looking at my notes.
You are so prepared. That's so funny. I love it. Most of the people are like, "Oh, you sent those," or I'm like,
Sinead,
"I sent them to you 2 minutes ago."
You know me. I get I get nervous, or I don't want to be unprepared.
I love it. Thorough. Okay. All right. What is the biggest lesson a horse has taught you about yourself?
This one was kind of easy, and it goes back a little bit to when I was younger. That you'll learn to be patient, and success will come, or you'll keep being impatient and you'll just keep spinning your wheels and never get anywhere. And again, like that happened a little bit, going to be a little bit later in life, and I was pretty impatient about a lot of things, and and then being impatient and you're frustrated and whatever. And I think like with age, I just, it was this Chevalier horse that I had. When I got him, he'd been done Fair Hill, now the 4-star level, 3-star level at the time. And, I got the ride on him, took him one preliminary, one intermediate, one advanced, took him to Fair Hill. That was successful, got put on the training list. Well, of course, I'm just going to go to Kentucky the next spring, complete and utter disaster. And I just remember being like, wow, like when I looked back, I just thought that I could just like keep going and going and going and not actually train him and do the work that was going to be, hopefully make us successful. And, it pulled me up short. I was like horrified how poorly it went. And, it was a huge lesson. Like he taught me, like he was perfect. Like he'd never put a foot wrong, like ever. And, but it was just like, there were so many gaps that needed to be filled in my own training, and I just wasn't being patient about it. And there's that.
Well, I think that we talk about that a lot here on this podcast and at Ride IQ, but there's connection, obviously, like literal like connection when you're sitting on a horse, but there's that relationship connection part of it that when you're, in the heat of the moment, you got to build that from somewhere. And when you're young, you just don't appreciate a good relationship.
No, you don't. Like we were not all born like Tick Maynard, that is for sure. Some of us had to learn it.
No, I'm so glad. We say that all the time. I'm like, I'm so glad I didn't know you when I was in my early 20s and you were in your early 20s. I think he knew a lot of relationships.
He would have not liked us probably at
No. No, that is it's so true. I remember saying to Kent Allen when I was like 18, I had a horse that a similar story, and he said he ended up x-raying everything, and the horse's feet were like Swiss cheese, and it was just, he's like trying to tell me this horse needs to be retired. And I had done an advanced or 3-star or something at the time, and I go, I just need him to do a 3-star or 4-star, get shortlisted for the Olympics, and then he can retire after that.
Right. That's all.
And I was like, I don't understand. Can't you just do something? And and I said it straight faced, and I think Dr. Allen was like, okay. Somebody needs to talk to her. Yeah, I know. I'm still embarrassed like 20 years later. All right. Do you have a favorite training or competition mantra that you reference regularly?
So they come and they go. The one that's been pretty consistent for a year, I'd say at least, and I think you have different ways of saying this, and I finally said it. I think it was even maybe at Kentucky. I was walking the course with a couple of people I was helping, and like going down to the head of the lake, and I was like, look, you are only like, do not feel the pressure to move up here. Like you are only moving up and lengthening the stride if you're going to make the distance better. Like it is not a sin to come down that hill and maintain what you have. Doesn't mean you're riding backwards. Doesn't mean that you're behind, the horse is behind your leg. Doesn't mean you're going slow. But I think there's so much, pressure sometimes, because we all know like the forward to the base ride is like the gold standard. Like we wish we could do that every single time. And oftentimes when we see people get into trouble, especially cross country, is they move up for no reason, like, or they start lengthening the stride before they know where they are to the jump. And so many of the bad wrecks that I see, or falls, or near misses, are people moving up irrationally. Like they're like, we were once in some clinic and someone said, yeah, just keep kicking, keep going forward. It's like, well, that's great if you're riding to a good distance, or if you're on a horse that has that fifth leg, or is it third leg fifth leg fifth, yeah. Humans third, okay.
Yeah, I was like, that's a different sport.
So like, you know what I mean? So I say that a lot. Like, so it started at a big event, like, or like if you're coming down to the coffin, like, because you don't want to move up to the gap, right? they'll either slam on the brakes or they're going to hang their stifles all over the rail. So, and it goes for, it's also a good way to get people not to ride backwards. So like oftentimes I'll say like, you are not like, you can maintain what you have, but you are not allowed to slow down to find your distance. And that to me, like people say like, how do you help people find a distance? That's the one thing that I've been able to over the years, like think about. It's like, oftentimes the distance goes away when we're just at the same time we're trying to find the distance to the jump, we're actually slowing down because we're thinking about it so much. So then the distance disappears. And when you can teach people to ride forward or keep maintaining the forward rhythm and tempo through that moment, then the distance won't disappear quite as much. And also your horse won't be confused because they're seeing what I'm talking about, which is just cantering up to the stupid jumping the jump. They're not thinking here I'm going to slow down and here I'm going to try to find my distance. And that's when you get horses that, rush. It's because they are confused about that moment when we think that we need to slow down just to speed up again. So maintain or move up is what I say, but you're only moving up if you're making the distance better. That's a very long, I'm sure you can edit.
I think that's huge. I mean, I think that's huge on the literal sense and in the bigger picture. I mean, I think we are a culture of fixers. And if you're uncomfortable, you've got to get in, get out, or fix, as opposed to just sit there for a second, I think that's an interesting parallel that you say with the horses, because I was reading something the other day and it was really neat because it was talking about like horses, they don't have a frontal lobe, so they don't have all these stories going on in their head. Like when we don't see that distance, we're like, what if I miss? What if someone sees me? What if I flip? What if I die? What if I wait? What if I, and like you said, the horse is just looking at it and just judging it without the emotion. They're just judging the jump and going to jump it. And then if you input all of that crap, for lack of a better term, it gets very confusing in that situation. That's exactly right. Like when the accidents happen, and it's hard when you feel like you like your own emotions kind of hijack your body. We've all seen that. You're like, what am I doing? or done it.
I tell so many people that they ride with too much emotion. Like, man, just take the emotion out of it. Like, there should be no emotion in riding. Like, good or bad. Like you just need to ride and no emotion.
No, nothing. Stone cold.
Dead inside.
I have no feelings.
Exactly.
I love it. Is there a piece of advice someone gave you along the way that you still reference today?
Oh man. I think just from, I think hopefully all of us are taught this when we're like young, it's basically like, unless something really terrible has happened to you, like everyone has life a little bit harder than you do. And I think, that was, I was the fifth of 5 kids. So I was always getting like beaten up and, given noogies and, punched in the arm, and my brother would like bruise my arm like every day. And I would think that would be like, so, I always thought like, my life is the toughest, and my mother's like, and father like, no, like you always and like just as you got older, like the minute you start feeling bad about yourself or feel bad for yourself, there's just, I feel so grateful that is in me to always think like somebody like, especially these days, we could be in a war-torn country, and like almost anything that happens can't be that bad, really. So I'm an optimistic person, and I think that I was lucky that I was just never allowed to ever be self-indulgent with my own emotions.
Kind of mentality.
That was a biggie, because you see how that just straps people in. Like they just can't. There's so many people that have that negative, like, woe is me mentality, and it doesn't mean that you can't have feelings and care and wish that things would be better, but man, if it's keeping you from moving forward and progressing and achieving your goals, what a waste of time.
It takes up a lot of space. No, that type of energy feels a lot heavier.
For sure.
Completely. All right, what do you do when you are seeking inspiration?
Oh, this one's so easy. This one came to me like I don't ever hesitate to do this. Not that I can always do it at the drop of a hat, but if I'm going through a patch where I'm really trying to think about things and think through things, if I possibly can, I just pick up, I go to either to the mountains or to the ocean, preferably with my dog if I can, and spend a couple of days. It's weird, like when I'm at home, I have a hard time, like even if I'm having like a quiet afternoon, if I'm home in my house or at the barn, like I have a hard time thinking about, things like in the bigger picture. I always feel like I have to go away or remove myself from, everybody, the town I live in, whatever. So I love like, when I need inspiration or clarity, I go to the mountains or up north. And we're lucky because in North Carolina, we have gorgeous mountains and a gorgeous coast. And if I was in New England, I'd go to the,
to the beach,
mountains or coast. So, yeah, that's what I do, and it works wonders. I've come up with, there's so many good things that have happened in my life have been planned during those times of just getting away and just being quiet with yourself and your thoughts. And it's amazing the things that I can trace back to those moments of just needing to, like, okay, I just need to go figure this out. Just a couple days, be good. Off we go.
That's awesome. That's huge. That's like that's huge, because it's not even like I got to sit down and like fix this. It's like if I go to this space, then that will help. Like if I
and
get
it's not always possible, obviously, but then I'll just say, well, I'll just put that aside until I can like find the time that I can really think about that and make a plan about that. And it's always coming at it from a really positive direction. I'm not like, oh, I got to get away because I can't just deal with this right now. And no, like I go in a positive, in a positive way to go figure out what I'm going to do next, or what I'm going to do about this or whatever. And so, try to stay positive all the time.
Yeah. A big picture thing. That's
Try.
really neat. We all try.
Try. That's all you can do.
Have you had an experience or an adversity separate from horses in your life that has directly influenced you as a horseman?
This was a really tough one because, I mean, you could say like, certain things like, meaningful loss or a meaningful injury to, like, we've all been injured, like a tragedy strikes or whatever. Like, all of those things are really hard to deal with. But what I found is that each one of those kind of big momentous things that aren't very positive that can happen to you, the one thing that does happen is that it makes you, hopefully what it does, like, things become very clear, right? You have a bad injury. It becomes pretty clear what you are going to need to do. Like you have a huge loss in your life and you're like, okay, what am I going to do to move on from this? Or there's anything like that. And I think, again, like, just to try to be a positive person, like, even if any kind of adversity, the one thing that comes out of all of that usually is clarity. And like, okay, that sucked, but it's very honest, like brutally aware. I mean, apparent what I'm going to need to do to move on from this. And I think that's one of maybe the blessings of bad things happening is that it actually does focus your attention pretty quickly about how you can possibly move on. So I think if you just like listen to yourself, and I've always found, not always found, like, these things don't come overnight. Like I've realized that that's something that comes from that, is just listen to yourself and try to see the clarity in the situation. Does that make any sense?
Yeah.
When I was writing it
100%.
down, I was like, Sinead's going to look at me like I had 3 heads on that one. But
no, I think it's all right. She does that all the time.
It's okay. I'm usually not that deep, but I was like, yeah, but that one came pretty easy to me, weirdly.
I think I think that's awesome. Well, I think it either is gonna like break you or you're gonna figure it out, and it's like both are hard, both are hard. So you might as well do the thing that is gonna get you somewhere on the backside. And
it's not always that easy, right? Like,
I
mean, I know you lost your dad real suddenly. I lost my mom real suddenly. And, so you say, oh, yeah, I just got clarity and I just moved on. I mean, those types of things are really hard. But you feel really like grateful that actually you feel bad about losing somebody that much. But on the other side, like it's like, okay, if you're gonna not let this define your season, say, if you're competing or or whatever it is. You just have to like have clarity about it, what you're going to do, how you're going to feel about it, and how you're going to be able to move on. I don't know. Like it's just, I think you just have to, I try to be a super positive person, and that's,
I tend to give myself time limits, like depending on the level of the thing. Like I'm like, okay, this, I need 10 minutes, or I'm like, I need 10 days. And then once that
test at
time
Kentucky,
limit
I just
is up,
I'm just going to be mad for 10 minutes. I'm going to throw my dressage saddle and my top hat back in the day in the track over my trailer, and I'm just going to like be pissed off for 10 minutes, and then I'll be fine.
And then I'm going to let it go, but I am going to be all like, stay away. And then it's going to be gone. It's so funny because I, like, even with pain and stuff, like I'll do it. Like if I do something, I'll just like count to 10. And now Brett's, he's 3.5. And so whenever anything, he has an owie or anything, he'll just count to 10.
God, you trained him to do it himself?
Yeah.
That's pretty amazing.
I know. And it'll come out of nowhere. Sometimes I'm like, what are you doing? And he's like, what's it do for that? And he skips 5 for some reason. So he actually is better than me because he can do it in 9 seconds.
Wow.
But
that's really good.
I just kind of find like sometimes I need to like count to 10, and sometimes I need to count to 10. Like the girls in the barn will make fun of me because somebody will say something and I'll just feel my like temper going up, and I'm like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. But I think that makes, it's very clear. I think that makes perfect sense in those situations. And it's been an interesting, that's been like one of the most interesting questions for people, and hearing kind of the feedback on that, because it really gives a good picture of where,
you know what it is? It's your Barbara Walters question at the end of the interview. She would always ask that question that would get people like thinking, and then they'd start to tear up, and they would be like, why are you making me cry? But
I was hoping for tears. I was what is going to make Bobby cry?
There's no crying. There's everybody around me knows, like, just don't cry in front of Bobby, because he has no idea what to do with it. Like none at all. So just don't cry. He won't be mad, but he just won't know what to do.
He just will stand there awkwardly.
Yeah, exactly.
So, that is so funny. I love it. Well, this has been awesome. I so appreciate you taking the time. I know you're busy and running around and changing the world, and
it's a fun time of year. It's nice and busy, but we're lucky to do what we do, and it's super fun. And you're good at this, Sinead. My Lord.
Talking?
You're good. Yeah.
Talking with my friends?
Well, I wasn't going to say that's all you have to do. But no, there's a real art to it. And I think you are, make people feel like you're good at what you do. It's great.
Oh, thanks, man. So are you heading to Kentucky? What's your...
Yep.
On a badminton
I
or
have
anything?
Right now it looks as though 1 or 2 people might be going to badminton. So that would be kind of fun, because it's been so long for everybody. I would just like to go just to watch. So, but God, it's a crazy time of year, because it seems like the beginning of the year, at least in North Carolina, it starts a little bit slower for us than it does for you all. But then once it starts,
you're like in it.
And then all of a sudden you're at Kentucky. It's like, how did we get here already? So, but it's a really fun time of year. Lots of fun people in town, lots of nice horses and riders. So we're just going to kick on and go. Go.
I love it. Well, I really appreciate it. We're gonna sign off here, and good luck to you and all of your students and everyone all over the world.
Thank you, Sinead.
I really hope you enjoyed that conversation. Before you go, I just want to let you know more about Ride IQ. At its core, Ride IQ gives everyone access to instruction from the best equestrian coaches in the world. It might sound impossible, but with Ride IQ, you get access to the private mobile app that has hundreds of on-demand, listen while you ride audio lessons taught by top riders and coaches in eventing, hunter jumpers, and dressage. Here's how it works. You look through the app and choose a lesson based on your horse or a skill you're working on. There are lessons for green off-the-track thoroughbreds and nervous horses, and horses that are behind the leg, as well as lessons that teach every stage of skills like shoulder in or trot lengthenings. Then you tack up and press play, and you have a top coach like Doug Payne or Leslie Law or Gina Smith in your ear guiding you every step of the way. If you enjoyed today's episode, it is always appreciated if you can take a moment to share the podcast with your friends and family and leave a review on your podcast app. The best way to support the podcast is to become a Ride IQ member at ride-iq.com. And when you do, we hope you're excited to see that In Stride is just one of multiple podcast shows on the app, including hack chats, conversations with coaches, and more. Thank you so much for listening. Have a wonderful week, and please do press follow or subscribe on whatever podcast platform you listen on. And as always, remember to pat your horse.